Richard Ross, who did a series of photos on girls in the justice system in the US, and I found this images very powerful. So, why choosing the topic of girls in the juvenile justice system? So, first of all, it's because girls have become the fastest growing segment of the juvenile justice population in the United States. And I found that most of the research on juvenile justice have adopted a gender-neutral approach, or we just apply research on boys to girls. So I thought it's very important to look at the specific needs and realities of girls in the juvenile justice, because in the light of factors such as exposure to gender and gender-based violence, or caregiving responsibilities for their own kids and for other family members. So this research is mostly focused on institutions' power and the reproduction of social norms and gender norms. So girls make up around 25% of the juvenile justice population in the United States. So this paper basically argues that structures must be tailored to the needs and realities of girls and intersectional identities, but at the same time, I also want to highlight the risk of a politics of differentiation that is most of the time based on the understanding and perspective of the hegemonic power of the state, and too often what passes as girls' programs or gender-responsive programs are in fact based on gender stereotypes and are reinforcing and reproducing gender norms, social norms, and power relationships. So as a consequence, it's important to understand and analyze the state's ideology and discourse in the development of juvenile justice initiatives. Because although sometimes it emerged from legitimate claim, it has transformed into strong regulatory mechanisms. So I critically examine how the development of juvenile justice for girls is based on a hegemonic model of power and has constructed a normative framework for punishment that is impacting youth minorities and marginalized identities. So just to start with the theory, I just wanted to briefly present Foucault's perspective on power, control, and knowledge. So basically, Foucault focuses on the historical creation of institutions, and he states that those are mandated to define, control, and manage behaviors. And the creation of this institution has led to the development of a categorization of abnormal versus abnormal, healthy, unhealthy, acceptable, unacceptable. And this has in turn led to the classification of certain behavior as deviant. So the goal of those socially created institutions, such as law or education, is to define, repress, and manage behaviors and activities that are deemed deviant and in need of intervention. Foucault argues that power operates to control the action of both the individual but also the collective political body. So for Foucault, it's very important to understand this notion of power and control with knowledge, because he thinks that to understand power, we should look at how knowledge is created and how it provides for the basis and for the creation and deployment of power relationships. So applying a Foucauldian analysis to the issue of juvenile justice was for me very important, because it shows the interconnectedness of power, knowledge, and control, which appeared evident. And I made a link also with the doctrine of parens patriae, which it's basically the idea that the state is given the responsibility to act as the parent of juveniles in violation with the law. And in our modern society, it seems that this idea that the state can act as the parent of the juveniles is very much accepted, cultivated, and it is reinforced by practices and juvenile justice development. So what I mean is that parens patriae doctrine is applied without critical consciousness to the juvenile justice system. And I would add also that the fact that juvenile institutions have become racialized has also reinforced the legitimacy of the state to control and manage youth identities. And I would also add that this paternal power is also white, middle class, and heterosexual, and is trying to construct identities in a normative framework that is based on the values and norms of a certain population that dictate the power. So briefly about the development of juvenile justice in the US. So until the creation of specialized courts for youth, youth and adults were tried in criminal courts along the same patterns. So in the US, we have in the 19th century initiatives and advocacy work from penal reformers such as Thomas Eddy and John Griscom that really tried to show the importance of differentiating between youth offenders and adult offenders. So following this movement, we have the New York House of Refuge that was established in 1895, and that was designed towards the poor, but also young people deemed in the past delinquency by authorities. So shortly after, a similar institution spread across the country, and the implementation of these differentiated structures also shed light on a legal vacuum because the proceedings and courts had still not been adapted to youth realities and experiences. So it's in Chicago in 1899 that we see the first juvenile court that was established, and it represented the unifying entity needed to create a coherent juvenile justice system. So it's interesting also to note that the reason behind the establishment of such courts was mainly based on considerations of the need to protect juveniles from adult offenders and provide them with tailored rehabilitation programs. So more than a punishing logic, these courts were created under the logic to rehabilitate young offenders. So important distinctions were made. While juvenile cases proceedings were not adversarial for adults, criminal law intends to punish them, which was not the case for juveniles. So, but along the years, looking at the development of the jurisprudence, we can see that youth cases and adult cases, the line between the two was sometimes not clear, and that we have some cases where youth were tried along the same patterns as adults. So the hopes of having a reformatory institutional framework that was more concerned with the rehabilitation of youth gradually transformed into a more punitive instrument. So the first, because my focus is also on girls, so the first focus on girls in the juvenile justice system began with Chestnut-Lint in 1980s, and she described the structures and practices of the juvenile justice system as biased. And she found that the system was punishing girls for legitimate responses to sexism and gender violence. So social problems, persistent social problems, were turned into the fault of the victim. And so her critique was mostly structural and based on the law and system decision making. And as an example of these gender biased structures, it's the case of the use of status offenses. So a status offense is a misbehavior which is not criminal for adults, but it becomes reprehensible when it concerns youth, such as runaway or certain sexual behaviors. So we see that through the use of status offenses, the courts uses a double standard closely linked to norms to sexual morality that tolerate boys being sexually expressive, but that condemns girls for adopting certain sexual behaviors. So in the early 19th, the most common charge against girls was immorality. And a national study in the 1970s found that 75% of girls in the juvenile justice system in the US were there for status offenses that had more to do with gender or sexuality-related nature, such as pregnancy, relationship with other people, or masturbation. And for boys, it was more about criminal offenses such as violence or theft. So, generally speaking, we see that there is a paternalistic reasoning behind the use of status offenses. And what stands out also is that morality and social norms are very much inscribed in the structures of institutions and proceedings. So we have important changes in the juvenile justice system since the 1970s. And one of the most important change is the introduction of the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act in 1974 that basically requires states receiving federal delinquency prevention money to deinstitutionalize status offenses. So following the introduction of this act, we saw a drop in the girls' incarceration rates. So girls fully beneficiated from the introduction of this act, but the deinstitutionalization of status offenders did not structurally change the correctional environment. So now with the development of gender studies and family theory, we are able to have a look at the layers of the population of juvenile justice systems. So I'm going to focus on girls, but I just want to say that talking about gender also is linked to all youth. For instance, there's a massive incarceration of boys of color, and that has a lot to do with racialized stereotypes of masculinity that construct young men of color as dangerous offenders, dangerous criminals. So for girls, basically intersectional theory, what it is it looks at how the intersections of different layers of identity impact on individual experiences. So gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, and class have a collective effect on how girls experience social context. And it's very important to use the theory also to look at how girls experience the juvenile justice system and how the system responds to and affects girls' different identities. So when gender and race intersect, it creates categories of girls that are especially vulnerable to certain system policies and practices. And it has been found that existing patterns of sexism, racism, and paternalism have the effect that girls of colors have a bigger chance of arrest. According to the Office for Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, in 2013, black females were nearly 3 times as likely as their white peers to be referred to juvenile court for a delinquency offense, and they were 20% more likely to be detained and 20% more likely to be petitioned to courts than their white peers. The study also found that American, Indian, and Native Alaskan girls were 40% more likely to be referred to juvenile court for delinquency and 60% more likely to be detained. So the issue of LGBTQI girls also provide another example of the importance of understanding intersectional identities, because in recent studies, it's known that LGBTQI girls experience more harmful social context, and including higher rate of abuse and homelessness. And there is a study of youth in California's juvenile justice system in 2012 that found that 38% of LGBTQI girls had been removed from their home because someone was hurting them, compared to 25% of their straight and gender-conforming peers. And the same study found that 49% of LGBTQI girls had been homeless, compared with 30% of their straight and gender-conforming peers. So we see that intersectional identities experience systemic disparity, and while there is a growing awareness of the prevalence of girls of color and LGBTQI girls in the juvenile justice system, it seems that the jurisdictions still lack a deep and coherent understanding of those identities and how to take it into account in the work. Okay, so for me, given the history of juvenile justice systems, I think that there is a potential to shift the paradigm from a logic of punishment and control to rehabilitation, and that special attention should be dedicated to understand girls' experiences of trauma and meet their specific need, because the current system does not really provide gender responsive and culturally informed support. And I think that there is a need to identify and respond to the needs. So in the short term, also one of the challenge of the juvenile justice system will be to support, girls, support and acknowledge girls' identities, and to give girls agency over their own lives, because it seems that for now the state and the juvenile justice system pretty much tries to control and instill some kind of morality to those youth. So I just wanted to finish by giving the example of the case of Jane Doe. So that was, it was in 2014. So in Connecticut, the Connecticut Department of Children and Families placed Jane, a 60-year-old transgender girl of color, in Connecticut's adult prison. So it has to be noticed that in Connecticut, adult women's prison, there is only one prison for women and girls. While for boys under 18, there is a different facility. And then they faced, Jane had a history of trauma and violence and abuse, and so in her behavior, she became violent when in the system, and so the prison for women sent her to another facility in the neighboring states, and that put her in isolation in the end in a boys' facility. So it shows also that this case is a strong example of the way juvenile justice system often prioritize control over treatment and does not acknowledge identities or understand identities based on the hegemonic power of the state, which is very limited when it comes to gender. So my question now is how So I think that institutions must become aware of their own gender bias, and racism is one step. But also, I'm asking myself the question how to promote adequate understanding of girls' realities within structures and institutions, and how to break the stereotypes that persist within the system.
Common or well-known for most scholars, but it is a well-known concept in the US, where it is mostly worked and researched in. So I brought a small definition of reentry. So prisoners' reentry includes all activities and programming conducted by the criminal justice system to prepare prisoners to return safely to the community and to live as well-being citizens. In Portugal, we would use the concept of social reinsertion or social reintegration, but for my research purpose, the reentry definition was more neutral and therefore more suitable for my goals. And so this reentry definition has three different stages. The first of the stages is the programs that prepare offenders to re-enter society while they are in prison. So everything that is done with prisoners while they are inside the prison, and we have a transition phase. This is a second part. So when prisoners are prepared on the transition from the inside of prison to the outside of prison, and in a third part that is after imprisonment. So which programs or activities do we have to file individuals back to society and to guarantee that they are well-being citizens. So what studies are concluding so far on reentry is that it's a complex, of course, and multifaceted problem, and those re-entering community are failing at very high rates in not completing crime again, so this is not any news. Punishment alone fails to change individual and structural barriers faced by many ex-prisoners. Re-entry affects crime and as social, political, and economic consequences, has social, political, and economic consequences for individuals, families, and communities, not only, of course, the individuals, but concerning the prisoner itself, the stigma associated with the criminal past, as well as the social networks to access the social capital resources, significantly affects his or her reintegration after prison, and these difficulties ultimately also affect public safety. What about re-entry in Portugal? Which activities and programs do we have? So inside prison we have, at least on our regulation, a lot of, and we try to fulfill that regulation, try to adapt on our prisons, educational, formative, working, cultural and recreational programs. But there are some studies, there are not that many, but there are some studies that are pointing out the limitations on the ways that programs and activities are developed inside prison, and even how they are not only developed, how they are perceived or worked with the prisoners. On the transition to the outside, we only have administrative or judicial measures with prison furloughs and parole release, and we have also in the end of some sentences or when we have a conditional release, a specific situation for individuals that do not have a place to stay, so they don't have a house or somewhere to go after imprisonment. On that situation, they can intervene directly with that person. Otherwise, it will just open the door and you can go to whatever you want to go. Okay. So, what happens in Portugal is that, as Manuela Ivanko already talked about during the morning, is that we are facing financial cuts due to because of the economic crisis. And so not only we are facing financial cuts, so we have less money on the judicial system, but also inside prisons. At the same time, we have a growth in the prison population. So we have less resources, but we have more population to deal with. And in the last 5 years, for example, we have a growth on 22.5% of the population. And so we are facing right now overpopulated prisons, especially in the central ones. So my postdoctoral project has main objective understanding how re-entry, recidivism, and resistance are defined by analyzing both the criminal justice system and life trajectories of prisoners and ex-prisoners, considering the intersection of variables such as class, gender, ethnicity, and age on a longitudinal study. And as you may see, the project is divided on the 3 different stages of the re-entry phase. And I'm going to present the first stage part of the results, and only on specifically on the expectations, perception of prisoners towards the role of the prison in the inside, and other social factors of the entry process on the outside. I'm not going to bother you with the theoretical and analytical perspectives, but I'm using life course perspective on a broader sense to understand these trajectories. But since I consider life course perspective a little bit narrowing or limited on its research, I'm gathering or trying to articulate it with other theoretical and analytical approaches like work-view theory of action, mainly through the abacus and campus concepts, the intersectionality perspective, as my colleague also used and explained on her presentation, because I'm not using only age, as it is really common on life course perspectives, but also gender, ethnicity, and social class. I'm crossing in a complementary level of analysis since the socio-structural level is the most important, okay, and then going to the bottom of the analysis, and the qualitative longitudinal research and not the quantitative, to try to understand the mechanisms and the social factors in the re-entry process than just major phenomena. So, understanding how prisoners perceive their lives and the potential opportunities and constraints within their environments can provide important insight into their future involvement in crime. And this is not only for how they are going to perceive their life after prison, but also how they experience the whole prison time. And so I'm going to focus today on two things: the role of the prison and preparing them so how they see the role of prison, and also the social factors considered relevant for their re-entry process. And data collected, so some information is on fieldwork and data analysis. The fieldwork was conducted from September 2015 to May 2016 on 3 prisons, 2 male and 1 female. Both male prisons, one was in the north, another one in Porto, one in the south in Lisbon, and the female prison was only in the north on Porto. Data collection techniques are used direct observation, informal conversation, interviews with professionals, but also prisoners, and documental and statistical analysis of prisoners' files. These prisoners' files that I collected data of was only for prisoners who were being released on the following year. Okay, so the year that I collected this data, and so because I wanted to see if these individuals were how were they seeing the programs and activities they were supposed to be on, okay, during their prison time. So focusing now on data, this is a raw distribution of the information. Okay, I'm doing content analysis, and this is only like some raw way of putting all that data together, but I brought some ideas for you. So, considering the role of prison in preparing prisoners for the after prison. So, male and female prisoners were telling me, some of them were telling me that they were not participating in any kind of activity or program inside prison. Like this male individual that said, no, they never caught me. Anyway, I'm not going to fight inside prison for what they don't give me. They don't give us anything, only on our legs. He was referring to violence inside prison, so just hitting on their legs. And the female prisoner saying, no, not now, but I already did it. Okay, so in this female prison, it's a specific, and I had to go deeper on that, and I don't have time, but it's a specific prison that is not overpopulated like the rest of the prisons inside Portugal, and it's a recent prison with a public-private partnership, and it has conditions that none other prison has inside the country. So most of female prisoners, they do work or they have some kind of activity on a certain time of their experience during prison. So it's not representative of what happens on other prisons, even female prisons. The ones that participate, they say that they have learned a lot, but at the same time they say they participate. For example, this male prisoner considered that, okay, I have participated in several programs and inclusively school, but it is all based on duties and rights, something that we don't have here. So what he's suggesting is that they are trying to making them learn something that they are not experiencing inside prison. So one thing is what they are trying to convey on their lectures, other thing is what they are experiencing on a daily life inside prisons. And then we have a situation of individuals that do participate in activities or programs, but that they don't consider to be, or they don't know that is an activity or program for their rehabilitation, even if we have to call it like that. So, like he said, no, I do not participate in any program. And I said, but you have said you were working and studying here. And he was like, yes, I am. And then, no, do you study? Yes. And besides that, nothing. So it's like, they don't understand even that they are being intervened inside prison, okay? They don't consider this intervention. So, consider the perception of prison utility, and this is a really difficult question because I'm asking a prisoner if he sees any utility on being in prison, of course, and you're like, oh my god, no, of course not. But there are some prisoners that really see or perceive that prison had a useful I'm forgetting the word. So useful
effect.
Effect, thank you. A useful effect for them. And these are some of the reasons why prisons were seen as useful for them. In male prisoners, as well as in female prisoners, we see value on formal learning. So they are going to school or they are working, something that they could not achieve on the outside of the prison. So they are using this time to achieve something that they were not able to do on the outside. They also value of informal learning. For example, I had to come here to see I was wrong, so they are thinking about what they have done and how they perceive their lives. And also when they see prison as a way of stopping committing crimes. Okay? And this is especially relevant when we are talking about drug addicts or persons that were drug addicts before going to prison. They say, if I was not coming to prison, I don't know what could happen to me. Probably I would die. Okay? So prison is seen as a way of stopping their criminal or deviant behavior. Like this female prisoner was saying, prison was important to shake me up, okay? To see I was not on the right path. On the other hand, we have other prisoners, male and female prisoners, who say that prison has no utility for them. They say they have an ineffective correctional treatment. For example, if it is useful, I am not getting it. Like, I don't understand how this can be useful for me. Here they don't help us. They only help us going lower and lower, because if we could earn some money working with books, here is crazy. We have work done. We have work that gives 1 cent to people who is working, for God's sake. And this is a specific situation. The prison I was talking about, that every woman, they have to work, and it's part of the rules of the prison. If they don't want to work, they will do something else, but work is important because they earn something, okay? But then they usually complain about the fact they are being explored. And when we go deep on this complaining, we can start to see that in fact there are certain situations that are ambiguous and they can be morally or ethically denounced, because, for example, there are some companies that only work on the prison. They don't have physical existence outside prison. So what they do is that they put their companies inside the prison and they exploit, of course, their work because it's a low-wage work. So these women say that they have to work, and sometimes, and this was proved also by prison guards and other professional elements, that sometimes women bring shoes and clothes to their own cells to work by night, because they know that if they do more 100 pairs or 100 shirts, they will earn more because they'll earn by piece. And so it's a kind of exploitation of their work, but I can go further on this the discussion. And during afterwards, okay? So they also talk about pain and loss. So how prison was so painful for them, and how they lost so much going to prison, especially in Cameroon, but not only. Saying that prison only controls crime, but don't do nothing else. Like, it controls crime on that moment, but their life is suspended, so nothing works, nothing is done besides that. And also, like this man says, it's a useless interruption. When I got here, I was already clean, saying no drugs, so this only interrupted my life. And this has to do with the time that goes from one process to the judicial decision, and then they go to prison. Sometimes they already are not on that pathway, so sometimes they already left their deviant or criminal behavior. and then they have to pay for their crimes. And so when they go to prison, there's no goal on it, okay, but punishment, of course. And male prisoners also state that prison do not prepare for the outside, so it's not only they don't have agility, but they do not prepare for the outside. Only prepare me to be more cold, or prison do not prepare us to go to the outside. No, we are the ones who have to prepare ourselves to the outside. And this is really important because the individual change is something that is common on their discourses. So prison is not changing them. What's changing them is themselves. If they want to change, they will. And so this individual click, this individual changing is really common on male narratives. Considering the expectations on the post-prison time, both male and female prisoners focus their discourse, their narratives on working. So working is like what they have to do after in prison because they depend on working to be able to succeed. Either because they need to work to live this normative lifestyle, or to reunite with family in both cases, or to move to. Sometimes they also say that they have to move to a different residential area to be able to work again, otherwise they will not be being hired, and or reach through immigration because they will not have opportunities here. And female prisoners focus a lot on the family support, as we will continue to see afterwards. Continue on their expectations. They say that, I don't know, some of them say, I don't know what's going to happen when I go out, so it depends if I got a job, for example, or not, what can happen or not. So working is important, but if I don't have a job, I don't know. Female prisoners focus especially on family care again. And then we have the male prisoners who say, I characterize themselves as the unbelievers because they believe that the prison is more punitive than reintegrative, so they will come back sooner or later. Like this one, then it's a recidivist who say, I have none expectations in this world. I have tried to change twice and they never let me. I had enough. Considering, again, difficulties and obstacles expected, they talk about stigma and getting a job. The main difficulties they get is the stigma associated with the imprisonment in getting a job, and also the role of the police and the justice system, because they say we are ex-criminals, ex-prisoners, and therefore we are going to be in special surveillance after going out. They also focus on routines, so going back to a routine, daily routine outside prison, not going back to alcohol and drugs, or some individuals say that will not have any kind of difficulties. Again, female prisoners focus on family, on having their parents and being their children. When I asked them, is crime an option? To see if they are really connected, because I'm going to be with them afterwards, so I wanted to see how they see going back to crime or not. And they say, some of them say no. For example, female prisoners, this no is like super strong because of prison experience, life lost outside, and crime is seen as something harmful. But on certain situations, they say no, but. So, no, I'm not going back to crime, but I don't know what can happen outside. And if something happens, if I get sick and I don't have money to pay for a surgery, or if someone do something wrong with my family, that on those situations I'll be suffering. So, what we can see to finish regarding the role of prison is that for some prisoners give some relative importance to prison, like value formal and informal learning, consider individual and criminal control. Others focus their narratives on negative prison consequence and its inefficacy. It is interesting to notice how prisoners don't have a deeper understanding of the reasons why they are involved in some programs and activities, and some of them don't even consider or understand them as programs or activities. This culminates with the perception that prison do not work for individuals, reentry individuals do. When we look to social factors, working seems to be consensual as fundamental, more referred factor both in expectations to post-prison time and possible difficulties and obstacles faced. Both male and female prisoners point out the stigma associated with the criminal past, as well as their living conditions and lack of support are significantly affecting their perception of reentry after prison. When we look deeply or a closer look to gender main differences, and I'm not focusing on other intersections, family is the more predominant in female prisoners' narratives, so everything is around the family, not so much as working like in men, okay? And docile, and this is extremely interesting because we have a lot of docile and compliance narratives in women, and we have more critical and incisive narratives in male prisoners. So it seems that male prisoners are more incisive on their critics. They do not. They are more. They complain a lot about the system. They complain a lot about what's happening with them. But women, even when they complain, they are more subtle on the ways they're saying that. Okay, and they seem to be easily docile. I didn't want to use this word, but it seems that they are more careful on the ways they expose their feelings and territories and even how they perceive the system. And I'm going to finish here. So, thank you.
I'm going to start with a text of Estela do Patrocínio. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Great. I'm going to start with a text of Estela do Patrocínio. That is a black woman poet that lived in asylum in Rio de Janeiro for 30 years. And I'm just... Okay. Great. So I'm gonna, it's a little piece of her work. So I'm gonna tell it first in Portuguese and then I will translate in English just because in Portuguese the spirit is very strong. And so, meu nome verdadeiro é caixão enterro, cemitério, defunto, cadáver, esqueleto humano, asilo de velhos, hospital de tudo quanto é doença, hospício, mundo dos bichos e dos animais. Os animais, dinossauro, camelo, onça, tigre, leão, dinossauro, macacos, girafas, tarugas. Reino dos bichos e dos animais é o meu nome. Jardim Zoológico, Quinta da Boa Vista. Quinta da Boa Vista. My real name is Coffin Burial. Cemetery. Corpse dead. Human skeleton, asylum of hope. Hospital of all that is illness. Asylum. World of animals and creatures, the animals. Dinosaur, camel, dragon. Tiger, lion, dinosaur. Monkeys, giraffe, turtles. Kingdom of animals and creatures, it's my name. Do Quinta da Boa Vista. Quinta da Boa Vista. So, Estela ends this part of her work with a reference of Quinta da Boa Vista. That is the place where the imperial family started to live from the day of independence of Brazil, of some kind of this, that, for instance, is celebrated for many people today. So, another curious relation with the life of talent and of Brazil is that the asylum, the national hospital for psychiatric illness or something like this, the asylum, was built as a self-honor to the consecration of Pedro II the Emperor. It was inaugurated in 1852, and it was the most outstanding building in the city of Rio de Janeiro, made of frozen marble, cited by infant arrived by the sea, sign of civilization in colonial territory. When the asylum loses the civilizational social status, the building becomes the university, and the psychiatric hospital is transferred to the surface. Rio de Janeiro, 1911. 200 women solicited the asylum of Praia da Saudade. It was this asylum built by Pedro II. Are transferred as surplus to a plot in the north zone of Rio de Janeiro, away from the center, where an unhealthy construction was established to accommodate this group. The new structure was intended as a workers' treatment colony for these 200 women. So this place was called first Colônia das Alienadas, Engenho de Dentro. Engenho de Dentro is the name of the and the second year of this building, it was already 2 times the number of people that were there, the number of women. So when I get there in the year of 2015, it was already renamed because the transfer that occurred from the Praia da Saudade to Engenho de Dentro turned this colony of women into the national hospital for the alienated ones. And I'm going to try to tell you now just 2 movements that caused some kind of deformation in the spatial and relational established structure there. And there was 2 movements caused or initiated by 2 different people that worked together and started to do things even before and some organized movement in Brazil. So the first one was Mr. Sílvia, that was a psychiatrist, very important in the movement of reorganizing the space, because the psychological and emotional suffering is very related with this perception of existential space. So she started now doing many of the procedures that other physicians used to do. So she started making some experience with the materiality of the space, with sculpture and painter, and considering the mental and emotional realities to make communication and establish new relations between people that were occupying their sex space. Because there was a recognition that the relation there was of incarceration together, that Nisi took 2 years in jail and so as well and everything. So this first experience of Miss Silveira inside the hospital gave her a perspective of doing a space outside the institution, the public institution. And then she started with Casa das Palmeiras. There was a space that she put that was very important, that all the windows and all the doors could be open every time. And the hierarchy, and there was not like difference between people that was working there and people that was there for treatment, as we can put this. And then Lula Clay, that worked with Isla Silveira in Casa das Palmeiras for a long time, he was meant to go to the same hospital to work bishop, and he started important work in a nursery there. First, with the support, with proposal of Chepla that is called Extruding the Self. This experience starts from to make possible communication that allow the team of this nursery not to, for example, make forced medicalization with people that were hospitalized. So this practice was very useful to establish a new way of negotiating the path of the treatment, and as well to make it stronger, the movement of the team of this nursery. And do not use themselves, and do not use this forced medicalization, not to use the uniforms. They started to make a like an unfold or a deformation space that had deactivated the initial thought about that. So it was very subversive and effective in the making space inside the space. It was not supposed to use it like this. Like they started to use the corridors as places for meeting, and people could walk inside there. And this kind of experience was very important to make perspective for many movements that come after that. And of course, for the people that were there that had not a possibility at first of thinking in a purpose, I don't know, but I use or walk through the space in a way a little more free, I don't know. The point is, this movement, I guess, they are so important because they came before many other institutional support for this kind of movement. So they were pieces of a great alliance that allowed many what can some demands from a movement that is counter the classic I don't know, anti-manicomio. And yes, I went there and these two movements were really important to now. They keep occupying this space of the hospital and make it possible, because it was possible in two movements before. And it's a little bit like that. I'm just talking from my head because I just got to and I'd like to read a piece of a word of Mr. Silvia just to repetition. Just a minute. Analyzing the case of the reincidents, the hospital, it is said that if you sit down, you find two things. You find equality and find dignity philosophy. On one hand, you find international cooperation. On the other hand, model of the machine and type, like when a comes, he can a little dog excited you eat him thing. Set him at the same time. It screams but does not feel. The ill, it feels, doesn't, because what matters is the reason. I think, therefore I am. If the ill is until that the reason crumbles, then as well does not. So these structures, like these relations established Lula Vanderlei with space over time, and Lisboa Silveira keeps demanding the right of exist with the realities, the emotional and the mental and the psychic reality, like constant sorts of different imaginary of the space. And yes, it was really nice.
She said thank you. Maybe. Okay. Is Camila still there? Is she yes? Yeah? So I will now open the debate, and I hope we can all include Camila in our discussion, even though the difficulties we all experience, but we applaud her effort, and we have the abstract here, so okay, it's now open. Thank you. Podemos tirar isto aqui. Podemos tirar.
Now we can see.
No questions?
No, I thought we were waiting for
The micro?
she said she could hear us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the micro, you can try.
Thank you. I want to thank all three of you, Camila, if you can hear me, all three of you for really interesting talks today. I have questions for Eleanor and for Sílvia. Maybe the question is one question, and that is, and I know you're at different stages of your research, but my question is, how do you think you might take a step back from the way you've described what you learned to give us maybe a slightly different picture of what is there? So I'll give a specific example from Sílvia. You were talking about how people in men's prison are different, they're more incisively critical, so on and so forth. People in prisons for women emphasize family and so on and so forth. And, so I wonder how and to what extent they have learned to present themselves that way to become, to be understood as rehabilitated. Right? And then going from that passive statement I just used to Eleanor, how and to what extent do you understand what's happened with the juvenile justice system in the United States? Might you think about the girls whose fates you're particularly interested in as somewhat more actively involved in what's happening to them? I.e., can you think about a way to frame the problem in the discussion so that the response to the problem isn't so the system ought to improve to be better for the girls? You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Okay. And Camila, I loved what you were saying about space and relationships. That was fantastic geography. I loved it.
Okay. I can start answering in 2 points. First, during my PhD, I was looking for pathways to prison. So I was trying to understand the trajectories that end up in prison, and more or less these same gender differences on the discourses were exactly the same. So female prisoners would convey this family care role, and family was everything for them, and men again were more work orientated, more practical in their approach, and not so family or as a I'm not as a caretaker, as a gardener, a caretaker. But this cannot help me on this analysis of the question you were asking me, because of course they were already in prison, so they could have switched their narrative considering that. But I'm already interviewing ex-prisoners, so outside of the prison, and I have double standards. So I have female and male prisoners that maintain their discourse, their narratives on the same manner, but I also have female and male prisoners that are switching the way they are conveying their image. So I cannot answer that question, because for that I would have to be able to be with them before going to prison, even experience the imprisonment. What I can say is that on the second stage, so after being released, some individuals have changed, male and female have changed the ways they present themselves, and they present their trajectories and their priorities. So that I can tell you, but the rest I can't.
Another question for me. So if I understood correctly, you're asking how to reframe the problem to have girls to be more active protagonists in the way we see the problem, and not just saying, oh, the structures is, so I think, this is a very interesting question, because, my approach was more like looking at the system and institutions and see how they have impact on girls, but maybe, a different approach could be starting with girls' experiences at the center of the research, and see how their identity could, Yeah, I mean, this is a different perspective on my research, so I guess it's it's a bit hard to answer this question, but it's true that in a theory of change, that is maybe a good starting point, better than looking at institutions that the only problem and not persons, but it's holistic and individual, and it's true that I mean, most of my thinking has been focused on the structures and not that much the girls, but and I think that would also need empirical studies, to see girls' experiences, and not only in the juvenile justice system, but as you said, school to prison pipelines, and see the global pictures of the issue, and not only the juvenile justice system itself, So that would require a broader perspective angle on this question. So yeah.
I just want to be clear. I'm certainly not suggesting you do not study institutions. You might have noticed from my own remarks. Study them a lot. But it's just curious. Thank you both. Thank you, Camila.
I have a question, if I may. May I? No, I don't think the micro. But one question to Eleanor. Why girls?
Why girls?
Yes, because you didn't...
I said, okay.
I didn't understand immediately why girls and not boys, or why not boys and girls, and why not youths. And I liked very much the transgender example, the discussion implied there, and I wonder if you have similar cases to discuss here with us.
On transgender?
Or not on transgender, but where sexual orientation was a problem, or
okay, so for the first question,
yeah.
Can you use the microphone, please?
For the first question, because as I said, it's the juvenile justice population. I mean, girls are representing 25%, but the trend is increasing. So I thought it was interesting to focus on this population specifically, and also because I mean, in my academic background, I did a lot of gender studies, so that's where lies my interest. Yes, and so that was the case about gender identity, but I don't have a specific case right now to present, but within the juvenile justice system, I read some research basically stating that it's a very normative environment in terms of gender, but also sexual orientation, and just in terms of like how you dress, how you look. I mean, it's research shows that girls that express a different sexual orientation than heterosexual have, I mean, are kind of like repressed, so by the system, by the whole jurisdiction. But specific case, no, I mean, I thought this case was very interesting because it showed how youth and gender intersect, and how, she was 16, but they put her in the women's prison and then in the boys' prison. Yes. So that was kind of representative of what I wanted to say, the intersection of identity, but yeah.
You were saying that is it working? Yes. That some of the prisoners who took part in programs didn't even perceive they were taking part in this program. But as we were talking, like Professor Ruth said today, of mass incarceration and industrialized punishment, also these programs are like industrialized programs. They don't meet prisoners' expectations or are not designed specifically on prisoners' needs. So maybe this can be a problem for the expectation of the prisoners' administration is not the prisoners' expectation.
Yeah. Yes, that's another discussion that I didn't bring today, but that I'm doing, that is characterizing all the programs and activities that our prisons have, and how, and it's interesting to see how so the staff's perspectives on those too, because even when we talk with prison guards, with re-education professionals and everything, they also point out how programs are not evaluated, they are casuistic, they do not, sometimes they are more benefiting for maintaining individuals occupied than for their future in the outside. So they have a practical reason inside the prison, so the prison can work and do not have many problems while working, than for the individuals itself. So I could stay hours talking about this, but yeah, one of the problems is when these programs, they exist because they have to exist, okay? So you need to have education, training, vocational training, work, health programs, and so forth, because you are in the European Union, you have demands that you have to fulfill, so you have to have them. The problem is how you develop them and how you implement them, and that's the actual problem, because if you read our regulation, like we have a lot of beautiful programs. You just go to our prison website, General Director of Prison Services, and you have a huge list of programs that apparently we have in prisons, and then you go to a specific prison and you say, okay, which programs do you have working here? And so they say, well, we have 3 programs working here because they train their own professionals to develop and implement those programs, and so they are only allowed to implement the programs if they have training on it. So if those 3 professionals have the training, they will implement on the prison, but then when they implement on the prison, they have time to develop 1 program per year, for example, because you have lack of resources and you do not have a lot of professionals. So when they are when they decide to implement a program, they implement 1 program, for example, for 15 prisoners in a prison where you have more than 1,000 individuals. And for the prison statistics, they have this program working, and so it means that everything is okay. And when you are trying to see it through and you go deep on this, no, it's not working. They are, our professionals used to say that they are fulfilling criteria, like, okay, program, okay, done. And it has, it's done. And then we go forth and you just check everything, like check, and that's it, okay? So we could be really hours talking about this. So most of these programs and activities are more for to the practical day life of the individuals and even for the professionals, more than it is for their actual rehabilitation, reinsertion, reintegration, and everything, and okay, like this. For what I see and from how they expose that to me, okay? Of course you have exceptions, and of course you have individuals that know how to work with the system and knows exactly what to do with them, and okay, sometimes they actually have their schooling and they use the training to develop outside that training in an actual job, but that's not the norm. That's not what you see most of the cases, okay? Sometimes just to have money, you need to work to have money to have your own things inside prison, or to send money to your family, or Sometimes you just need to be occupied because you have to do something, because if you do not do something, you don't be outside of the prison cell. In some facilities, if you don't have school or work or something, you'll be locked out for most of your time. So in order not to be locked out in your own cell for that time, you need to do something, okay? So we have to consider a lot of variables. And so I don't remember the question already, but yeah.
Another question.
Okay.
Did you see space for autonomous organization? Like not programs from God.
So it depends. In some prisons, some prisoners in the female prison, some prisoners wanted to develop their own clothes. So to costura. Sewing. So they wanted to sew their own clothes. So they wanted to have a little atelier to develop workshop. Yeah. So they pressured a lot the director, and they wanted it, and they got it. Okay, but they don't earn as much as the others. So, but they do that because they can, because they don't need the money. Okay, so on that specific situation, they had the space to do. They achieved the goal. But I also had another thing, is that some guards and some professionals, due to their academic knowledge, sometimes they think about programs. They think about some things they would like to implement on the prisons because they believe it would be better for the prisoners or for whatever. And they express that most of the time they don't have the support to do so. And they are blocked by directions and by the administration. So, okay, you have a certain space, but it depends on the people you have inside the prison where you are working. And it's something that I'm actually learning a lot, is that prisons it has to do a lot with the person that you have inside prison, the professionals, or even the prisoners. They do the prison. Of course, regulation is really important, of course, and there's a lot of things that are structural and that are constrain a lot the dynamics, but people do prison. So people are important to understand dynamics and to understand why certain things do not work out or work out.
Just a follow-up on that question. I mean, what you said now makes a lot of sense about the enforcement, that the programs that exist are largely window dressing, right? They have a little practical effect. But when you were describing your research, you said you were asking the prisoners, how they felt about the programs, and they were telling you that, the programs they weren't being helped, that the programs weren't having any effect. And you described that as them not understanding that they were being intervened upon. So it seemed like you were discounting when they were giving you a fair analysis of what was going on. In your description, you were discounting that analysis. They don't understand that that they're actually being helped. So why that disconnecting between the reality that you describe now and how you evaluate their answers?
It's two different things from what I understand. There are certain individuals that do not know they are under a program or activity, and that's one reality. Okay, so they are in school or they are doing some work, some cleaning or something in the prison. And when I asked them if they were involved in any kind of program or activities inside prison, they would say no. And then I would say, but weren't you at school? And they would say yes. Okay, this is them not understanding, okay, that they are being intervened in some way. This that I'm telling is that what you are telling and that I was telling, it's a completely different thing, is that when they are being intervened but they don't see any useful or they don't see that specific job or school as being something that they will use afterwards or that is important for them or that will be rehabilitated for them. That's a different thing, okay? That's a different group. Yeah, so I don't know if I was clear on that, but it's two different things. Really, prisoners that do not understand that they are being intervened when they are, in certain ways, because they are under a program, okay? And the ones that are under a program and they know they are under a program or activity and don't see any kind of utility on it, because they don't see it useful for them, okay? I don't know if, okay.
Any more questions? Yes?
I had a question, but you were already answering a lot for Sílvia. I was wondering a little bit, because I work with prisoners in Nicaragua, where there's a similar, like, very legal discourse, regulations, all beautiful, and then in reality nothing's going on, or very little is going on. But prisoners do appropriate this discourse of change, and they say, yeah, like the self-reflective thinking. So what I recognized a lot was this individual change click. So they, instead of saying the prison has changed me, they say, like, I changed. And I was wondering if you could reflect on that maybe a little bit in the sense of resistance, or a kind of resistance to the disciplinary power, like that you can feel that you're in a program, but they can have very different effects. So kind of like what you were mentioning, that it's not that they maybe don't understand that they're in a program, but they don't understand that program as an actual re-education, or they think like this is not, if I'm in school, I'm in school. This is not a re-educational program, or this is not a rehabilitative program. So a little bit to push through those kind of categories to, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about that specific point, because I'm following them back to the outside, and the individual change now is going to a different side, because now they are pointing other difficulties and obstacles, and they are not individual, okay? So when they say that in this opposition, like prison is not doing anything for me, I'm doing for myself, yeah, clearly is a way of resisting and saying that prison do not help, so I am the one helping myself, okay? So prison is seen as a deposit, a place where I have to be, where I must be because I was convicted, but it's not doing what should be doing, okay? Because prison should be have other purposes than just punishing, and what they are doing to me is just punish, okay? Even if they say they do things, they don't. Even if they are trying to do something, it's not that is going to help me, okay? So it's in this tension, in this. It's not prison, it's me. If I want to, because this is not enough for me. Because if I wanted to go to school, I would have done school when I was outside. Okay, so it's not this that will help me. So this individualistic way of looking to their experience, it has to be with this contrast, this tension between prison and individual. Because on the outside, what I'm noticing now is that they are putting the focus on the social obstacles more than individual obstacles, of course. Okay, so for me it's even more interesting to do the analysis, because sometimes I want to say, well, but you said it was individual. No, I'm kidding. But it's interesting to see how you put yourself against the system, and then on the outside you put yourself against the system, but because they are not helping you on that way. So it's really interesting and thank you for the question, yeah, because I'm debating myself with that, through that.
Yes, Simon, last question.
A question for Eleanor, actually, and I mean it's a question I don't expect you to answer me scientifically because it's probably impossible. But you said that women is the fastest growing prison population, so why? Does that mark any kind of initial state of change in the way patriarchal relations are organized, that maybe the idea that the woman, the female is a not dangerous body may start to be fading out. I'm not saying that it's becoming more similar to the male body, but who knows? Is there any other possible reason?
Well, I think that is one of the main reasons too. We have this change of, there's a change in the relation between women and violence, women and delinquency, and that may have impact also on the population rate. But if you look at the population, the rate, it's girls of color that are the main population of the prison. So this is a change regarding women, but I think this is also a change regarding what kind of women, are more dangerous, or the stereotypes of that women of color are maybe more dangerous than white women. So this is I mean, for me this is linked with girls but also race.
I just want to make an observation about the United States. I'm talking about women, not girls. And so it might be totally different for girls, but women. The number of women in prison in the early 90s up until about 2000 was increasing at a faster rate than men, but the absolute numbers were so low that it was easy for the rate to be enormous without the number of women in prison being, at the end of the day, enormous. And then they started to decline, and almost the entire decline can be explained by the shrinkage in the number of people in prisons for women in California. Then they started to go up again, and the increase is white women. White women.
Okay.
White women.
Okay, I can talk about the Portuguese.
No, white women, but I just have a question. And so what is the main reason advanced with this explanation of this?
Rural drugs.
Yeah, it's the same in Portugal.
Bear in mind, in the United States, the myth is that the reason there are so many people in prison in the United States is drugs. That may be true here in Portugal. It's never been true in the United States. Never. But in recent years, there's been it's pretty well reported, a drug epidemic, opioids, and opiates, but mostly opioids. And the rise in arrests and convictions has been actually among white women. So, I mean, just keep this in mind as we think about racialization and the kinds of things we were discussing earlier today.
Okay.
It's pretty provocative.
Yeah.
What happens in Portugal regarding women in prison is that we have also a growing rate of women going to prison, and it's due to war on drugs too, because at a certain point we discovered that women also trafficked. Were drug traffickers too, not only men, and we have that switch on our history. And I have a narrative of one woman that I interviewed that told me exactly how she got caught on that specific time of her life and not before, because she was dedicating to the drug trafficking for a long time, but police would never search on her drugs because they were not expecting to see drugs on women. So, and after a while, and understanding how the drug trafficking was working and everything, they started to direct their search for women, and then you have a high rate of women incarcerated. But we also have another tendency. It's the foreign women, the ones that are not resident in Portugal, because since Portugal is a passing through way from South America and even Eastern European countries, there's a lot of drug couriers being kept on our airports, and they go directly to the prison. So we have a lot of women from Brazil, from Venezuela, Argentina, and even Eastern European women from Moldavia, Ukraine, that were mules, and they got caught on the airport, and they are really representative part of our female imprisonment. So we have both realities, and they are also directed, of course, to drug trafficking.